Nobody anticipated this clash. The world of hip-hop and reality TV was completely upended by one shocking incident at a star-studded event in New York. Ciara approached Jim Jones with a demand while the cameras were filming and the champagne was flowing. That made the whole room freeze. What came next? Let's begin. It was supposed to be simply another New York night to remember, using a champagne pouring, cameras flashing, and a star-studded audience glistening under the lights and fitting in with the industry. Ciara looked like an R&B queen. Royalty, however, in the middle of the picture ops and the VIP chat, an unforeseen event happened. One that is currently resonating in every nook and cranny. Rumors about reality TV and hip-hop. Witnesses reported that Ciara walked with her usual grace and command directly to Jim Jones. In front of all within earshot, he dropped a bombshell. "Chrissy, it's time you got married. There is only a demand, no build-up or small conversation." Like a thunderclap, they rang through the room. People in the area claimed that you could feel the air moving right away. Jim froze. His face was caught between astonishment and incredulity. Viewers have been witnessing Jim and Chrissy's on-again offer for years. One of the most notorious love cliffers in hip-hop history. The engagement narrative unfolded. On national television, here came Ciara, an outsider to their romance but a powerful individual in her own way. She stepped in and confronted him in public. What came next? Then, that's where Macy ends up. Everyone was taken aback by Jim's remark. As he refused to remain silent, some people think it was defensive. It's referred to as brutally honest. Anyway, it created a commotion and pulled Chrissy into a whirlpool she had not requested. Additionally, the conflict gets more explosive the deeper you go. There was no calm environment in which Ciara and Jim Jones interacted. It took place during one of the year's most prominent industry gatherings. There were enough people watching to ensure that, before the night was over, it would go viral on social media. It was the type of gathering where everyone was acquainted with one another and rivalries were abandoned. Friendly smiles and an unwritten guideline to keep the real drama off the floor. In just a few seconds, Ciara broke the rule. Ciara had been working the room all evening, greeting individuals, posing for pictures, and many attendees confirmed this, even sneaking into a few private discussions with other musicians and executives. However, a person with knowledge of the situation claims that she had one particular stop planned. She went directly to Jim Jones during her rounds that evening. The timing couldn't have been more dangerous. Jim had been talking to two producers just now. Ciara's eyes were focused on him as she walked up to him, as if she had been mentally prepared for this. They didn't ease in, according to reports. Ciara's voice was loud enough for anyone in the vicinity to listen. "You should quit playing games now. Christy, Happy Christmas." The words lingered in the atmosphere. The strong emphasis was intentional. In the middle of the step, people froze. For a moment, even the background music appeared to disappear. Jim, who is rarely surprised in public, looked shocked. He flicked his eyes, his mouth quivering between a frown and a smirk, as though he was undecided about laughing. Consider it a challenge. According to one witness, Chrissy was talking to a small group of people across the room. Her smile vanished as I noticed something, and she started to approach, maybe pausing in the middle to see how Jim would manage things without her. Intervention. Jim's first reaction was silent, as if the whole room had been suddenly stuck between anxiety and interest. His body language conveyed that message. He crossed his arms, leaned back a little, and gave Ciara refused to back away from a glance that asked, "Do you really want to do this here?" "It's been 14 years, she said. She spoke in a stern, yet even tone. "She's been waiting long enough for you." The initial demand was not as powerful as that statement. Everyone knew precisely what she meant when she said that Jim's protracted engagement in Chrissy's story had grown to be one of the most talked about sagas on reality TV. Chrissy had expressed her desire to marriage, about wanting that commitment, more firmly established than when viewers saw her pop the question to Jim on Love and Hip Hop, only to watch it linger for years. Each season seemed to offer a resolution, yet the plot simply kept repeating the same old conflicts. Marriage proposals, reconciliations, and then nothing. Supporters were devoted, irritated, and occasionally outspoken in their criticism of Jim's lack of success. Ciara's remarks struck that squarely. Jim's voice was soft yet piercing when he eventually spoke. "That's between Chrissy and me," he continued, citing one source. "But then Ciara puts up a fight between you and her, dragging it out in front of everyone." The tone changed again with that nearly accusing remark. "All right, so there was more than just a marriage discussion." Jim's public management of the entire relationship was described by others who were close enough to hear. Jim's jaw clenched and his cheeks hardened. He moved in closer. Although he lowered his voice to reduce its distance, pieces were still picked up by those in the vicinity. Something about not depending on someone else's schedule or being told what to do. With her hands gently clasped in front of her, Ciara stood erect, calm but unyielding face. She wasn't being too passionate or shouting. she was getting to the heart of it, and Jim claimed that the witness's presence added to his uneasiness. Discussions deteriorated as more people swiveled to observe. The event photographer even hovered close by. The camera was partially raised. Whatever was happening obviously went beyond the usual celebrity teasing. Chrissy wasn't present them yet, but her stance was rigid and her gaze was fixed on the conversation, as if Jim had given her the first of what she had anticipated. He reportedly told Ciara that person frowned, didn't understand the depths of his relationship with Chrissy, who understood that it wasn't necessary for them to be together. We're okay, just the way we are. But before Ciara could respond, he added a scathing question and went on dismissively. Why do you care about my company? By whom was it sent? You? The line that lit up the gossip blogs was who sent you. Ciara was speaking on behalf of someone, perhaps even someone else, rather than for herself. Chrissy confided in Ciara about her frustrations, and within hours, suggestions appeared online, prompting Ciara to act. Others thought Ciara was just tired of being a woman and a friend. Observing another, the woman deserved respect, but she waited too long for it. Ciara furrowed her eyebrows as Jim leaned in slightly and murmured something unexpected, which further enhanced the intrigue of the conversation. According to another witness, there are items concerning Chrissy and me that you are unaware of. You would see why we're not in a rush if you did. What might he have meant by such enigmatic remark? Was it about money, trust, personal issues, or something else? Jim gave a headshake. Before departing, he muttered something under his breath and left Ciara standing there in a state of calm that Chrissy maintained across the room, never bridging the gap, as though she had expected resistance. Witnesses claimed that she stared him in the eye and remained silent when Jim got to her. By the end of the event, the couple's brief nonverbal exchange was nearly more telling. The thing had happened. Already, the talk of the evening. While gossip websites were posting and hashtags were beginning to spread, attendees were texting their pals. People weren't just debating whether Ciara was proper to confront Jim or not. They wondered when they examined Jim's defensive and evasive behavior. At the time, one was aware of the meaning behind his carefully guarded words. That the narrative did not finish here. Jim's unplanned eruption would continue throughout the following day. The night after the incident, Zis and Chrissy were both pulled further into a dispute that was set to go public in a way that none of them had anticipated. Whispers had already developed into all of the New York gossip blogs. In some ways, Ciara was regarded as the hero in Los Angeles, while in others, she was seen as the one who had finally voiced what everyone had been thinking about, overstepping her bounds and interfering in someone else's relationship. No matter which side people chose, one thing was for sure. Jim's mysterious comment regarding their existence. Interest had been stoked by things you don't know. A brief, unsteady cell had spread quickly by the following morning. A phone recording of the altercation has published online. Jim's voice responded, "That is between me and her." Before, he leaned in to utter the following. 14 years is too long. Ciara was clearly pointing with her hands, but it did not capture expression pertaining to unknowns. The brief 30-second video was enough to send social media into a frenzy. On Twitter, fans went bananas, breaking down every frame. When she says, "Marry her," observe Jim's expression. The user typed while encircling his clenched jaws frozen. Frame. Chrissy appeared hurt but unsurprised, according to someone who slowed down the footage to assess her background reaction. There were several theories. Jim was perceived by some as having no desire for Chrissy and Avera to get married. Others thought he was keeping something from the public because it would make sense. Even the most ardent rumor watchers were taken aback by Chrissy's next action. Posted on Instagram herself. It wasn't a tirade. It wasn't an illuminating denial. It was a picture. Wearing sunglasses and enjoying a drink of wine. She was seated on the beach. "I'm fine," was the caption, and fans flooded the remarks. She was expressing her lack of care by reading into the absence of tags and an explanation for each pixel. Or did it exist in a quiet way? She had completely given up on getting married. Ciara was holding her own in the meantime, although she remained silent about the altercation. She liked a number of postings that praised her for holding Jim responsible. The internet only required this. Suppose she backed up everything she said that evening. According to some insiders, Ciara claimed to have talked to Chrissy following the incident and reassured her that the conversation had been based on love and respect. It was another matter entirely whether Chrissy noticed. 2 days later, a major was interviewed by an unnamed industry source, which provided the real fuel for the fire. An entertainment website claims that Jim and Chrissy's relationship experienced more peaks and valleys than the general public was aware of, suggesting that there were deeper issues than just cold feet. Although they refused to go into detail, their remarks uncannily matched Jim's. Another rumor started to circulate at the same time. According to this, Jim's hesitation to wed Chrissy was related. 2 financial issues were present. This view held that property disputes and entanglements made marriage more challenging than it first seemed. Some even conjectured about trust, funds, and prenuptial agreements, painting a picture of a relationship in which love wasn't the main driving force. Jim posted a mysterious tale on Instagram with a close-up of his trainers and the caption, "Moving the way I move." Although he didn't specifically address rumors, it appeared as though he was strengthening his belief that no Bodai would put pressure on him to make a decision. Choice. For every supporter who applauded his independence, there were twice as many detractors who called it a diversion. Regardless of how widely publicized the demand was, the conversation had progressed well beyond Carrera's altercation by this point. Talk shows were adding their voices, relationship experts offered their opinions, and podcasts dedicated whole shows to the story. Draws attention to the risks of prolonging an engagement. Each tape from Love and Hip Hop, which included Jim and Chrissy, was passed around, re-examined, and reframed when Chrissy seemed like she was going to leave but stayed. Viewers pointed it out. Others brought up Jim's earlier interviews, where he mentioned marriage in a hazy manner. During this time, a surprising ally intervened. Jim's mother said in an interview that she admired Ciara's enthusiasm but cautioned people against presuming they knew the whole story. Mama Jones is well known for never holding back her words. Marriage is more than just a wedding dress and a ring. There are things that other people do, she remarked. Not C, and M is a man who comes from her. When he's ready to move, it was an admission that Carrera's remarks had to wait, as well as a defense of Jim. Jim's voice can be heard on a leaked audio recording purportedly from a private chat between Jim and a close friend. Heard, "Even though I love her, I won't let her pressure me into doing that. It must be on my terms if I do it." When the friend asks whether this means he doesn't, Jim laughs quietly and replies that soon is a related phrase. Another round of outrage was triggered by the release. While some supporters supported Jim and said that marriage should only occur when both individuals are ready, not under duress, the others accused Jim of coercing Chrissy. Even the relative comment was acknowledged by the apologists. That sounded unimpressive. Chrissy said nothing at all, uploading only a picture of her dog along with the words, "My peace." Ciara, however, appeared to become more outspoken. A few days later, something unconnected happened. One reporter asked her if she regretted going up to Jim. She shook her head and smiled. Shaking his head, he went on. People may find the truth upsetting, but that does not preclude its telling. The situation had unexpectedly come to a halt, with Jim attempting to avoid direct responses and both women keeping their ground. The mystery deepened with every new rumor, and the public had more questions than answers. However, insiders claim that following the altercation, tensions between Jim and Chrissy reached a breaking point. The pressure was mounting, yet they stayed together, and something important was about to happen if the murmurs were real. Jim might be forced to do so, or the partnership might be terminated for the better. The narrative was far from over, that much was evident. Indeed, to those who listened closely, it seemed as though the real story had just begun. The impasse was short-lived. Jim Jones fueled the flames himself, making MHL intriguing on his own terms, just as it appeared that the conflict would, as opposed to succumbing to the customary cycle of gossip fatigue that transpired during a live Rio interview meant to promote his latest musical endeavor. However, Jim's whole attitude changed when the host slipped in a question about Carrera's desire. The grin reappeared, but it was more piercing. He started to lean closer to the microphone. "You are respected, EI. She is a queen in her own right. But I own our relationship. It's not someone else's plot. Entertainment. And the public has no say in the matter. Compared to most people, Chrissy and I have experienced more. Getting married does not constitute our authenticity. We're prepared." The tone was defensive even if the comments were composed. He essentially challenged anyone to do so. The host gently probed him to see if he could comprehend why certain followers, despite Chrissy's friends, believed she had been waiting too long. Jim took action without thinking. Playing judge and jury from a distance is fun for everyone. On the other hand, when the lights are off, nobody is home. When I'm alone, no one is around. And her life's journey. It's not because someone cornered me at a party. If I marry Chrissy, it's because I wake up one morning and declare, "This is the day." That was something Carrera knew, but he omitted the part that would have for weeks. "Everyone has been conversing. There's something going on between Cray and me. To be honest, you're not yet prepared to get married. To provide people a wedding, I won't stand here and act like everything is ideal. I would like to go through it, rather than pretending for the cameras." After a moment of silence, the host asked if this meant there were problems in the partnership. Jim Pravita nodded slowly. "Every relationship is struggling. Just because people like 2-bit, ours are louder. We have some extremely serious stuff. I'm not putting a ring on top of a Kraken foundation, and we have the faith to repair." The camp was both flammable and disarming. In a few of ours video, the interview was extensively shared in snippets. Jim's refusal to give in to pressure was praised by several supporters who thought his strategy was mature and reasonable. He was attacked by others who said he should not have committed the crime. Individuals make use of imprecise explanations. Talk shows ask the relationship specialist to argue if his justification was sound or only a means of postponement. Although Ciara did not publicly reply, she did give a small comment on her later that evening. An Instagram story. The truth has the power to both hurt and heal. Ori later that evening. Jim was not mentioned, but Chrissy's silence was universally known. Her absence at Jim's promotional events that week, nevertheless, was remembered. She was seen out with buddies by the paparazzi. No engagement is in place. You can see the ring. That raised more questions about whether they were done, but it didn't necessarily mean anything. Then, to everyone's astonishment, a tabloid published an article claiming that Chrissy had been prepared to leave permanently early this year, but she stayed after Jim assured her that they would take concrete steps towards marriage by 2024. If that were the case, Ciara's altercation might not have been as impromptu as they appeared. Jim might have been reminded of the vow with a purposeful prod. In keeping with earlier rumors from Part 2, the magazine also made references to financial difficulties. Before getting married, Chrissy apparently wanted some assets protected. Although Jim opposed prenuptial agreements, the claim was unsupported, but it offered a level of complexity that complemented Jim's comments regarding things that aren't yet ready for marriage. The pressure cooker kept heating up. In the days that followed, Chrissy was tagged by fans. Others added ring emojis to Jim's comments on pictures about wedding dresses. Every iconic love and hip-hop video showcasing their relationship and conflicts was making a comeback. The talk shows were openly talking about their chances of ever going down. At the peak of the noise, the Chrissy broke down. Quiet. At a charity dinner, she looked gorgeous, grinning for pictures. Jim paused, bowed her head, and continued, "I suppose everyone's got an opinion on what I should do." It was a modest but forceful statement in response to a reporter's question about her interview. One person was left in the dark. If she was implying a way out, some perceive social media's explosion as a sign of empowerment, while others see it as a tactful farewell. A week later, a behind-the-scenes video of Ciara confronting Jim in the first incident. The grainy footage following Jim Cyrus' trek away and was seen talking to another visitor, stating that she should give it to herself if he won't give it to her and that she deserves more. The line was unedited and raw, and it ignited the flames once more. Whether Ciara simply spoke or went too far, Chrissy already knew that. So let's move on to the current dispute. However, one thing was certain. The talk had not ended with Jim's shocking answer. It had shattered it completely. Now, the general public was more involved than before, and Jim was under more pressure than he had been in years to either take that last step or suffer the repercussions. The path ahead was a narrow rope for Jim. Any hint of reluctance could be interpreted incorrectly. Any indication that digging occurred, it could be seen as self-centeredness. Chrissy had to determine how long Tushi was prepared to wait in the promises waiting room. Additionally, Ciara had to observe from a distance, as the consequences of her involvement reverberated throughout their lives. What follows could permanently alter supporters' perceptions of Jim and Chrissy and define their relationship. It might be more than just a discussion. If a public gathering akin to that altercation takes place in the future, it might mark the beginning or the conclusion of anything entirely new. Do not believe that this saga is slowing down. Everything that we have seen so far may be a prelude to the main plot. The fire started by Sarah's bold encounter hasn't gone out yet. Jim's enigmatic remarks have